Okay, let's dive right in. Today, we're tackling a massive question that pretty much every developer or company has to answer at some point. Where do you run your stuff in the cloud? And we're putting the two heavyweights head-to-head, Amazon's EC2 versus Microsoft's Azure Virtual Machines. Let's get to it.
First things first, let's just look at the sheer scale we're talking about. AWS and Azure aren't just a couple of options in the cloud market. For a lot of people, they are the market. Together, they control more than half of it. Now that's great because it means there's a huge community, tons of tutorials, and a massive talent pool. But it also means the choice you make can really lock you into an ecosystem, which is exactly why we need to look closer.
So that brings us to the big question, right? Which one is actually the right fit for your project? Is it EC2? Is it Azure VMs? There's no single simple answer here. It really truly comes down to what you're building, what your budget looks like, and honestly, what kind of tech you're already comfortable with. To really get this, we have to start at the foundation, and that's their global footprint. This isn't just about a bunch of servers in a warehouse somewhere. We're talking about a worldwide web of data centers that literally determines the speed, the reliability, and even the legal jurisdiction of your data. Just look at this map of their global reach. It's huge. AWS talks about it in terms of regions, which are basically big geographic areas, and availability zones, which are separate data centers inside a region. Azure does something pretty similar. So what does all this mean for you? Well, it all boils down to latency. The speed it takes for your users to connect to your service. The closer they are to a data center, the faster the experience. Both of these guys are massive, but it's always worth checking which one is physically closer to the people you're trying to reach. All right, let's get to the main event, the actual compute and performance. This is all about the virtual machines themselves, and this is where we start to see some really fundamental differences in how AWS and Azure think about the cloud. Brace yourself for this number, because it's kind of wild. AWS offers over 500 different types of EC2 instances. No, that's not a typo. 500. This means you can find a perfect custom-fit server for literally any job you can imagine, whether it's a tiny little web server or a monster machine learning rig. And you can fine-tune it for memory, CPU, graphics, you name it. And that massive number really gets at their core philosophies. Think of AWS like a gigantic hardware store with every possible nut, bolt, and washer you could ever need. It gives you ultimate control. Azure, on the other hand, is more like a curated kit. It offers powerful, well-integrated parts that are really designed to work seamlessly together, especially if you're already living in the Microsoft universe. Now, when you look at the actual hardware, the chips inside these machines, it's pretty much a dead heat. Both AWS and Azure give you access to the latest and greatest from Intel, AMD, and even those super power-efficient ARM processors. This choice lets you decide what's most important to you. Is it raw speed with Intel, a great balance of price and performance with AMD, or maybe energy efficiency with ARM? The choice is yours. All right, let's talk about the thing on everyone's mind, money. How much does all this cost? Understanding cloud pricing is so important because the most obvious option, the one you see first, is almost always the most expensive one. So everybody starts here. It's called on-demand or pay-as-you-go. It lets you fire up a server whenever you want and you pay by the second or by the hour. It's total flexibility, but you are paying a big premium for that convenience. You can think of it as the sticker price on a car. The first and most common way to save a ton of money is with reserved instances. If you know for sure that you're going to be running a specific server for 1 or maybe 3 years, you can commit to that up front and get a massive discount. We're talking up to 75% off. This is absolutely perfect for stable, predictable things, like your main production database. But for the biggest savings possible, I'm talking up to 90% off. You've got spot instances. You're basically bidding on the cloud's leftover, unused capacity at a huge discount. Now, here is the giant catch. Your server can be shut down with only a 2-minute warning if they need that capacity back. So this is amazing for jobs that can be paused and restarted, but it would be an absolute disaster for something like your live e-commerce website. This quote right here gets to the heart of Azure's biggest weapon when it comes to cost. It's called the Azure Hybrid Benefit. It lets companies that already own Windows Server or SQL Server licenses on-premise to just reuse them in the cloud. This can slash your costs like you wouldn't believe, making Azure the clear financial winner for a whole lot of Microsoft-centric companies. And here's a super important warning. The price of the virtual machine itself is just the tip of the iceberg. What's hidden under the water are all the other costs. Things like storage, backups, monitoring, and especially network egress. That's the fee you pay to move data out of the cloud. These things can add up so fast, so you have to look at the total cost, not just that hourly rate for the server.
Okay, so beyond just compute and cost, both platforms have these really unique features that can be the deciding factor, depending on what you're trying to do.
AWS has some really neat tricks up its sleeve. For example, you can hibernate a server, which is basically like putting your laptop to sleep. It saves everything in memory, so it can restart almost instantly. Their spot instance market is also way more mature, with better tools for managing huge fleets of those super cheap servers. And finally, they actually use machine learning to predict traffic spikes and add more servers before your site gets totally overwhelmed.
Azure, on the other hand, just doubles down on its enterprise strength. We already talked about the massive cost savings from the hybrid benefit, but it also has a bigger marketplace with over 17,000 third-party apps ready to go. And its native, deep integration with tools that big companies use every day, like Active Directory, makes it a totally seamless extension of their existing IT.
And you can see their philosophies even in how they handle automatic scaling. AWS gives you this modular set of tools, like a box of Legos, giving you really fine-grained control over every little piece. Azure packages it all up into a single integrated service called Virtual Machine Scale Sets, which is often a bit simpler to get up and running right out of the box.
Okay, we have covered a lot of ground. So let's try and bring it all together into a simple framework to help you decide which one of these giants is the right choice for you.
So, when should you lean towards AWS? Well, if your world is built primarily on Linux and open source software, it's a natural fit. It's also the clear choice if you're the kind of person who needs that massive variety of over 500 instance types to perfectly optimize performance and cost. And if your whole cost-saving strategy depends on using spot instances at a really large scale, AWS is king.
Now, what about Azure? The choice becomes almost a no-brainer if your organization is already a big Microsoft shop. If your number one goal is to leverage those existing Windows and SQL licenses through the hybrid benefit, the decision is pretty much made for you. It's also the stronger choice if you need to build a really seamless hybrid cloud that bridges your own on-premise data centers with the cloud.
So let's just boil this all down to the most important takeaway on price, because this is huge. For a standard Linux server, they are basically neck and neck. The prices are nearly identical. But the game completely changes with Windows. If you're running Microsoft software, that hybrid benefit in Azure often creates an unbeatable cost advantage. It's that simple.
You know, in the end, the fierce competition between these two is fantastic for all of us. It drives constant innovation and keeps prices in check. But the final decision, that has to rest on your specific needs. So, now that you've seen how they stack up, which platform really makes the most sense for your next project?